Okay, we're up to Daf Nun Beis Amid Beis, the beginning of the fifth parak. So the Mishnah says, Kol ha-menachos bois matzah. Most menachos outside of two, all menachos outside of the following two exceptions are always matzah. They're not chametz. You have to make sure they're matzah and not chametz. Chutz, mechametz shebetoida v'shtei halechem. The shtei halechem are chametz, and the toida carbon had 40 loaves, some of which were also chametz. So outside of those two, which were chametz, the rest are matzah. Shein bayis chametz. Now, Rabbi Omer. Now, here's the Gemara's the interesting Mishnah's question. So you have let's say you're making the shtei halechem. The shtei halechem have to come from chametz. Now, in order to make chametz, you need like a starter, a yeast. Now, the question is, how do you do this practically? How do you make the chametz of these doughs, considering you need to add a outside starter or yeast or sourdough in order to make it? It's just, right, flour and water will not just do it alone. You need to add a starting agent, a yeast. Right? Mom adds yeast. You have to add something. No, but it won't be chametz. It'll be technical chametz in that it'll be like on Pesach you be chayiv kares, but it won't be the nice chashav dough that you would be serving to a king. If mom were to take flour and water and just not knead it and let it sit for 20 minutes, it would not taste very good. So you need to have a starter, a yeast starter. So the question is, how do you do this? I have to make it rise. How do you do this? So the Mishnah says a couple of options. Hasar boid lehen mitaychan. You do it within the bread itself, meaning you take some of the flour, some of the water, you knead it together, let it start to rise, it'll become like a mini sourdough, then add it back in. So you're not using outside agents, you're doing it from within, but you're allowing it to start and rise, which the enzymes will begin becoming a sourdough, and then you put it back in. Yeah, but you can't do it days before, so you do it a little bit. So you take it, you just let it start to rise 20 minutes before and then put it back in. The problem is Rav Yehuda says it's not a good option. Why? So Rashi explains, because Rav Yehuda says it's not going to be really yeasty. I mean, if you're giving it, a 20-minute head start, that's not going to be enough. So it says Rav Yehuda, you know what you do? Take sourdough from outside, meaning the Beis HaMikdash had a batch of sourdough. Take some of that sourdough and put it in. Easy. The problem with that is, says Rameir, the Rabbanan said to him, as we're going to see in the Gemara, the understanding is that when you have to have an isaron of flour, it's not a measure post adding the water. You need a certain amount of flour. Now the problem is that if you go take, let's say, an ounce of sourdough, I don't know how much flour is in that ounce. If it was a thicker sourdough, it has a lot of flour. If it's a thinner sourdough, it has less flour. And if I need the right amount of flour, not dough. You see, if the avoida of an isaron for the chavitin, let's say, for the shtei halechem, let's say I need an isaron. If isaron is just amount of dough, then I could take a sourdough from outside and add it, and as long as it makes the requisite amount, it's fine. But I need flour. And if, let's say, I need 1 pound of flour, if I take 0.97 of a pound of flour, and then I take 0.3 of sourdough, I don't know that there's 0.3 amounts of flour in that sourdough, because it depends how the sourdough is made. Is it thick? Then there's probably more flour. If it's thin, there's less flour. The water affects it, and because I need to have the exact measurement of flour, not post dough material, I need the amount of flour, it's impossible. No, you can't have too much flour. In the carbon, if you have too much flour, it's puzzle. If you have too little flour, it's also puzzle. You need the right amount. So Rav Yehuda's option, the Rabbanan don't like either. So the Gemara will talk about this. Okay. Zak the Gemara says like this. Boy minei Rav Preda meravami. Rav Preda asked Rav Ami the following question. Menayin l'chol menachos shem bois matzah. How do I know that the average mincha is supposed to be a matzah? Okay, how do I know? It's a strange question. I'll tell you why. The pasuk says it. Okay. Minalon, the ksivba, the like ksivba. Well, some minchas it says matzah, and the ones that don't even address what it is, there's a general pasuk that says zois tyrus hamincha hakrevo sabnei aron l'fnei Hashem l'pnei hamizbeach. This is the rules of the general mincha. Hanoseres mena yochel aron ubadav matzos teyochel. So what do you mean? How do I know it's supposed to be a matzah? It's a pasuk that says it's supposed to be a matzah. So the Gemara says no. How do I know that it's ma'akiv? In order for karbanis, for something to be ma'akiv, you need two choices. Because the pasuk says to do something doesn't mean it's ma'akiv. That could be l'chachila. The way I know something's ma'akiv when it comes to karbanis is two options. Option number one, it's repeated. I need the pasuk to be said twice. Option number two, it's said once, but it has a lashon like tiyeh, teyaseh, like those certain words that are like that are symbolic of ma'akiv. So the question is not how do I know it's supposed to be matzah? I know that. How do I know that it's ma'akiv if it's not matzah? Meaning, where's my second pasuk? Omer lei mitzvah lo kami boiler. Pray to explain. I'm not talking about that it's a mitzvah, that I have a pasuk. Ki kami boiler la'akiv. How do I know that if you don't have a carbon mitzvah? How do I know that if I bring chametz, it's puzzle? Meaning, how do I know that matzah is not just l'chachila, it's ma'akiv as well? So what's my second source? So it says the Gemara, okay, la'akiv namiksiba. It says lo se'afeh chametz. Well, the pasuk says, right, again, I need two sources for matzah. I got one. And now I have a second one. Where does it say matzah in this pasuk? It doesn't, but it says lo se'afeh chametz. Right? It says don't make chametz. I can deduce that if I'm not supposed to make, what are my choices? Chametz and matzah. So if it says don't make chametz, i.e. make matzah, so there's your second. Now it's based on the presumption that when the pasuk says lo se'afeh chametz, it means don't make chametz. So what should I make? Matzah. Because there's only two choices. Says the Gemara, that's not true. Maskar of Chizda, ve'ema lo se'afeh chametz ela sa'ar. Maybe there's a third choice. There's chametz, there's matzah, and there's what's called seyar. Seyar is what in the Poskim we'll see later on when it comes to, I'm saying, not we'll see, but I'm saying if you learn Hilchos Pesach, it's called chametz nuksha, which is that it's not chametz, it's not matzah. So now what is it? There's two definitions of what it is. According to Rav Meir, it's where the dough begins to turn pale. You've already left the matzah world, but you're not in the chametz world yet. And according to Rav Yehuda, it's when there's cracks in the dough. Now, for the laws of Pesach, chametz nuksha is going to be also d'Rabbanan. It's not going to be chayv kares, but it's no longer matzah. But it's not chametz legamri. So the Gemara says maybe that's what we're talking about. Meaning, when the pasuk says lo se'afeh chametz, it's not telling me a second source to make matzah. Maybe it's telling me matzah is an option, or seyar is an option, but not chametz. So maybe the pasuk is saying I should make it seyar. Here's the issue, though. The Gemara just speak this out. Rav Meir says the definition of seyar is pale. Now, according to Rav Yehuda, who says that it's cracks, pale is completely matzah. So there's no, that's not, so that can't be an option. Meaning when the pasuk says, maybe the pasuk is saying, don't make matzah, make seyar. Well, according to Rav Yehuda, Rav Meir's definition of seyar is matzah. So put that out. Now, Rav Meir says, what would Rav Meir say about Rav Yehuda? He would say cracks in it is chametz legamri. So that's also out. The question is, the only shaila begins is would Rav Meir say it about his own, meaning Rav Meir's definition of chametz nuksha, maybe that's what the pasuk is referring to. And Rav Yehuda, that maybe, I mean, they can't be talking about each other, because they look at each other as chametz gomer or matzah gomer. It's how they look at it themselves. The Gemara speaks it up. The Gemara says, well, Seir Deman, well, who Seir could the pasuk be referring to that you're supposed to make it Seir? Now, Rav Meir or Rav Yehuda, according to if it's Rav Meir's definition in the eyes of Rav Yehuda, meaning maybe, how would Rav Yehuda read this pasuk? If it's Seir in Rav Meir's definition according to Rav Yehuda is matzah gomer. It's matzah mali. It's still matzah. Pale to Rav Yehuda is nothing. It's still matzah. So the pasuk that's not a kasha then, because maybe you're saying maybe the pasuk is not talking about matzah. It's talking about seir. Well, that version of seir is matzah. And the Gemara says either Rav Yehuda or Rav Meir. And if it's Rav Yehuda's definition according to the view of Rav Meir, chametz mali, that's straight up chametz. Cracks in it according to Rav Meir is straight up chametz. So the Gemara says, and either Rav Meir or Rav Meir, and even Rav Meir himself. You know how Rav Meir looks at chametz nuksha? Rav Meir's definition of chametz nuksha is that it's pale. He looks at it himself as well. You're not going to get chayiv kares, but you'll get lashes. So that's chametz. So again, we're trying to find out what does the pasuk mean. We're looking for a second source of matzah. The Gemara says, well, it says lo sefer chametz, which obviously means matzah. The Gemara says, no. Maybe it doesn't mean matzah, it means seir. Let's go through the options. Rav Meir looks at seir as chametz. Now, not chametz gomer that you'll get chayiv kares on Pesach, but enough chametz that it's not matzah. So if the pasuk says lo se'afeh chametz, don't use chametz. It can't be talking about seir, because seir is a type of chametz. So that's also out. Either Rav Meir or Rav Meir midaloki lechametzu. The Gemara's kasha to Rav Yehuda or Rav Yehuda. The kasha is maybe it's according to Rav Yehuda and Rav Yehuda's definition. Meaning, Rav Yehuda looks at chametz nuksha as not matzah, as not chametz, no lashes. That's the shaila. When the pasuk says lo se'afeh chametz, we're saying no chametz. So what else is there? Matzah. Not necessarily. There could be seir. According to Rabbi Yehuda, seir is a third category. Seir is a third category. So the Gemara says, Masker of Nachman Yitzchak ve'ema, another option, another kasha. You felt that there's just chametz and matzah. So now we're saying, what about chametz nuksha? Question number one. Good question, put that aside. What about a third option? Maybe it actually means using scalding water. Lo se'afeh chametz, don't bake it as chametz, but don't make it as matzah, boil it like a bagel. Says the Gemara, Masker of Nachman Yitzchak, ema lo se'afeh chametz ela cholet. Maybe it's not telling me matzah, it's telling me to make it as a bagel. The Gemara says, wait a minute, that can't be. Bagel is a whole different type of preparation. If it says se'ofeh, which means to bake, it obviously can't be boiling. The Gemara says, cholet ma'niu revicha. That's like a revicha. Revicha means like a bagel. The Gemara says, idik revicha, ksib revicha, like ksiv revicha. That's a methodology of preparing. Like if you go to someone and you're giving him a recipe for baking bread, and you're telling me all the ingredients, and then he calls you up and he's like, should I boil it? You said, no, if I wanted you to boil it, I would tell you to boil it. Obviously, I'm talking about bread is baked. So don't tell me that there's an option. How can there be an option of lo se'afeh chametz, don't make it chametz, boil it? Why would boiling is a whole different preparation of food? Why would I think that that's an option? The Gemara says, no, this is what I mean. Maybe it's an option, meaning when the pasuk says to boil things, that means you have to boil things. But now it's saying it's an option. Maybe you're supposed to read it like this: don't make it chametz. So what should I make it? Don't make it matzah. You could boil it if you want. Not that you have to boil it. Not that it's osir. It's an option. These are a second question of how do I know that there's a source that matzah is ma'akiv, and don't tell me lo se'afeh chametz because that's not clear enough. That's just telling me don't make chametz. Maybe it means make chametz nuksha. Maybe it means to be matter, to permit making it as a bagel. So says the Gemara, and a third question. Masker Ravina, ve'ema lo se'afeh chametz, l'meik megaver b'lav, ve'ivsla mitzla. By the way, another third question. Why do you assume that it means that when it says don't make chametz, make matzah? Maybe it just means there's a lav of making chametz, but if you make chametz, it's still kosher. Like it's still, you still have not proven that matzah is essential to make. All you've proven is that there's a lav on chametz. Or then you say, well, if I can't use chametz, I must be matzah. No, maybe it means there's a lav of chametz, but if you did it, it's still yotza. It's another option. So you know what the answer is? You're right. The source of matzah is not from a second pasuk. It says tihya. Tiyah means ma'akiv. The Gemara says, Elam inolan k'detanya matzah, yochel mitzvah tam lemer tiyah, hakasev chayva. It says tiyah by matzah, and tiyah is a lashon ma'akiv. Good. Now what we're going to do from here, one little bit of a Gemara. Not necessarily. If you're moving it quickly, if you're moving it constantly, it won't. We're machmer that we don't make things with hot water, but if you technically are constantly kneading it and constantly moving it, it shouldn't turn into chametz. It's very risky, but technically we use cold water because it's less of a likelihood. Whatever, not cold. We use overnight water, whatever. So cold, ideally cold. Now, by the way, one more little Gemara, very, very quick, and then I got it to basically to the end of the daf. So, boy, mini Rav Preda, Rav Ami. Now we're talking about Rav Preda. So, Rav Preda then asked Rav Ami the following question: Minayim l'chol menachos sheni loishim b'porshin. How do I know regarding all minchas you're supposed to make a matzah that if you use lukewarm water umeshamish leich mitzu, that there's a special mitzvah min haTorah to make sure it's matzah, meaning not just that there's an isser of chametz, there's a mitzvah to constantly knead it, to constantly move it, right? The way you make sure something's matzah is not just 18 minutes, it's to constantly have constant touching. Don't let it rest at all. How do I know that mitzvah, which we know applies to Pesach, how do I know it applies to chametz as well, to Menachos as well? So the Gemara says, Nimana b'Pesach. Now, do we learn out from Pesach this is shmartem es hamatzos, right? That there's a mitzvah to be shomer, to make sure that it remains matzah. Amar le no. He says, I don't need to learn out from Pesach. Kegufaksiv. Look at the pasuk itself. It says tiyah, and I could read tiyah as hachaya instead of tiyah, tichya. The hey and the ches are interchangeable. Live it, meaning hachaya, meaning make it alive, meaning make sure that it remains matzah. Not just passive. Matzah tichya. Actively make sure it's matzah. How do you actively make it matzah? By constantly kneading it, constantly touching it. So the Gemara says, wait a minute, so now you're telling me the word tiyah is for both? I thought it's ma'akiv, but now it's ma'akiv, and it's telling me there's a mitzvah to make sure that it's matzah. Is it raining? Says the Gemara, ha pixel akiv. I thought you used the pasuk already to tell me it's ma'akiv. So how do I learn two things from one pasuk? The answer is imkein lichtev kra matzahi. My tia shamin atarti. If it was just he, it could tell you ma'akiv from the lashon he. Tia, that lashon, that tells you that it could be changed to a ches, tichya, to actively make sure it's matzah. Now from here, basically until the end of the daf, we're going to have a story. The Gemara says the following story about Rav Preda. I'm the Rabban Rav Preda. So the Rabban once told Rav Preda, was Rav Preda the one with the 400 times of the student? That was him. So the Rabban said to Rav Preda, it's interesting, he's very sharp in this story. It's the opposite. Maybe he knew his students. The Gemara says that they told Rav Preda, Rav Ezra bar berei de Rav Avtulis. You should know Rav Ezra is by the door, and he's the grandson of Rav Avtulis. Du asiri Rav Elazar ben Azariah, that he's a great anicle of Rav Elazar ben Azariah. Du asiri Ezra, and he's the anicle of Ezra. So the Mamish giving his whole lineage. And Koyabava, he's by the door. So he told us to Rav Preda. So Rav Preda said, and actually, by the way, it kind of works with the other story of Rav Preda. So Rav Preda said, Rav Preda says, "What my kulihai? What do I care? Why do I care who his lineage is? Well, why are we talking about his anicle of anicle of anicle? Ibar Urian who? If he's a Talmud Chacham, yehei. Then great, I'll respect him. Ibar Urian Bar Avon, and if he's a Talmud Chacham and he has a great yichus, great. But Ibar Avon v'le Bar Urian. But if he has great yichus and he's not using his own potential, he's not a Talmud Chacham, then Isha Tichel, let fire consume him. Meaning, in other words, it makes sense with the other students that I don't care who your grandfather is. Try. Are you working hard? Meaning, well, you could tell me, his father, grandfather was a Talmud, he's an anicle of Rose ben Azariah. Who cares? Is he a Talmud Chacham? Is he working hard? If he's working hard, that's all I care about. What do I care about who his great-great-grandfather is? So Amrulai, they said, no, Urian, no, he's a Talmud Chacham. He says, okay, Amrulai, La'ayav V'laisis, let him come in and we'll shmuz. Now, Chazi da Avir Daita, apparently when Rav Ezra walked in, Rav Preda saw that Rav Ezra wasn't, he was like a little bit, not anxious, but he was a little bit distracted. So the Mefarshim say he was distracted because he just got blasted about his Einik, like, if you're known to be the anicle of Rose ben Azariah, and before you even enter the room, Rav Preda is like, I don't care who your grandfather is. It kind of threw him off. So, Rav Ezra, who's the anicle of Rose ben Azariah, he hears he doesn't. I don't know. It's a little bit jarring, you know. If you walk in before them, I don't care who your grandfather is. It's a little bit, jarring. So Pasach V'Amar, so Rav Preda therefore gave a drasha to make him feel a little bit nicer, like a nice drasha. The drasha is like this. Omer la Hashem, the pasuk says, we say in Tehillim, you say to Hashem, Hashem ata, right? You are my God. Okay? Now, stop. If I believe that he's Hashem, right, that you're my God, then I should makir toiv. But then the pasuk says, Toivasi balalecha. I do not give you my gratitude. So wait a minute. The beginning of the pasuk is, he's my God. And then it says, but I do not give him gratitude. Well, if he's your God, you should give him gratitude. The pasuk doesn't really make much sense. So the Gemara says Rav Preda, Amar Knesses Yisrael Fnei Kadosh Baruch Hu. Klal Yisrael says to Hashem Rabbanu Shalom Hachzik Li Toiva Shetadicha Ba'olam. Klal Yisrael says, you are my God, but you should give us Hakaras HaToiv that we made you known in the world. Right? Klal Yisrael makes HaKadosh Baruch Hu known in the world, so Klal Yisrael wants credit. To that Hashem says, Amar Lo Tovas Ba'alecha. Hashem is talking. So the pasuk is actually two people talking. It's Klal Yisrael saying, you are my God. And then the second pasuk is Hashem says, I'm not giving you credit. Why not? We did this. The answer is Hashem says, I'm not giving you credit, but rather, I'm going to give credit to Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov because they started it. Klal Yisrael just continued their job. So I guess his point is, so I guess his point is that don't worry, I may not care about your Einiklach to Rav ben Azariah. Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. That's all I care about. Your Einiklach Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. Exactly. I mean, we're all Einiklach of Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. That's the biggest compliment. Now the Gemara from here until basically the end of the daf, Rav Ezra who walked in hears this drasha. And the pasuk says, Adire kol cheftzei bam. He quoted a pasuk that said, Adir. Adir means mighty ones. That he hears this, he's going to start darshaning now. Now Rav Ezra is just going to go. Now, when Rav Ezra heard the word from Rav Preda, the word Adir, pasuk v'yamar, he says, I'm going to tell you a drasha. Now these drashas of Rav Ezra are very interesting. They're not based on psukim. They're based on like statements that people used to say. Just like they were like, terminology people used to say. Apparently, people used to say the following, and he's darshaning what it means. People used to say the following. Yavai adir v'yifel adirim me'adirim ba'adirim. So what it means is technically is let the mighty one come, punish on behalf of the mighty ones. He'll punish the mighty ones in the mighty way. That's what people say. And Rav Ezra said, let me explain what this means. Now, Yavai Adir Zakutinsky Baruch Hu. The first Adir, the mighty one, is Hashem. So let Hashem come. Adir B'Amar Hashem. V'yifla Adirim, and he's gonna punish on behalf of mighty ones, on behalf of Klal Yisrael. So Hashem is gonna punish someone on behalf of Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael called Adirim. Shenav Adiri Kol Chavtzei Bam. Who is Hashem gonna punish? The mighty Egyptians. This is referring to splitting of the Yamsuf. Ba'adirim elu hamitzrim. D'chsiv tzalu kaiferes b'mayim adirim. The mighty ones fell in the water. So the Hashem, the mighty one, is going to punish the Egyptians who are mighty on behalf of Klal Yisrael who are mighty in a mighty way. Ba'adirim elu mayim. In the mighty way is in the water of the Yamsuf. Shenemar mikoylois mayim rabim adirim mishbereya. It's a pretty brilliant drasha. He does this again. Yavo Yedid. This was a song. I don't remember. This was a song. It was a Shreki song, but it's a Gemara. Yava Yedid. Yedid ben Yedid, v'yivna Yedid, li Yedid, b'chelka shel Yedid, v'yiskava Yedidim. Yeah, it's not a bad one. It's kind of annoying, but not terrible. Yava Yedid ben Yedid. If Salman listens to this, he'll tell me what the song is. Let the beloved, the ben Yedid, the anacle of the beloved, v'yivna Yedid, build the beloved, li Yedid, for the beloved, b'chelka Yedid, in the chelik of the beloved, v'yiskab Yedidim, in order to atone for the beloved. Who is this referring to? So the Gemara says, Yava Yedid ze Shlomo HaMelech. The first Yedid is Shlomo. Shlomo HaMelech is called the first Yedid. Shlomo HaMelech's name was Yedid. You go to the next page. So let the Yedid come, that's Shlomo. Ben Yedid, the anacle of the Yedid ze Avram, who's the anacle of Avram Avinu. The pasuk is going to say, we're going to darshan this in a moment, that during the Churban, Avram Avinu, whatever this means, his neshama is davening by the Beis Hamikdash as it's being destroyed, and the pasuk says, "Mali yedidi bebeisi." What is my beloved doing in my house? That Hashem says, "What, Avram? What are you, my beloved? What are you doing in my house?" So Shlomo HaMelech, the anacle of Avram, is going to come. V'yivna Yedid, and he's going to build the Yedid the Beis Hamikdash. He's going to build the Beis Hamikdash. Yechsev ma Yedidas mishkaneisecha. How beloved are your dwellings? Li Yedid, on behalf of the beloved ones, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, he's going to build the Beis Hamikdash for Hashem. Yechsev Ashirina li Yedidi. Bechelka shel Yedid, and where is the Beis Hamikdash built? It's in the chelik of the Yedid ze Binyamin. Shnemer leVinyamin Amar Yedid Hashem Yishkoin levetach olav. That's referring to the chelik of Binyamin. And who is the Beis Hamikdash for? V'yiskaper b'Yedidim. It's to bring atonement for the Yedidim. Ze Klal Yisrael, Eli Yisrael. T'chsiv nasati Yedidas nashi b'koyfei veha. A third statement from Rav Ezra. Yavoi toiv v'yikabel toiv mitoiv l'toivim. Let the good one come, receive good from the good for those who are good. It's very interesting. He was like, no, he clearly was like, he had a style. Like he had a very specific, Rav Ezra had a specific style. So Yavoi toiv ze Moshe. Toiv is Moshe. The chsiv v'teira isaki toivu. V'yikabel toiv. So let the good, let Moshe come and receive the Torah as a toiv. Toiv zu Torah, and he's going to receive the Torah. The chsiv ki lekach toiv nasati lechem. Mi toiv, from the good ones Hakadosh Baruch Hu. He's going to receive the Torah from Hashem. The chsiv toiv Hashem lakol. Le toivim, on behalf of the good ones Elu Klal Yisrael. Heitiv Hashem la toivim. Another one. Yava izeh v'yikabel zois mizeh la'am zeh. Let this come and receive this from this for this nation. Okay, very similar. Yavi zeh Moshe. Let Moshe come. Dichsiv ki zeh Moshe ish. V'yikabel zois zu Torah. Let this come Moshe and receive the zois haTorah. Dichsiv zois haTorah shesam Moshe. Mimzeh, from this Hakadosh Baruch Hu. Dichsiv zeh keli vanveyu. La'am zu elu Yisrael. On behalf of Zu, which is Klal Yisrael. These are probably songs that like they would tell kids, and it was like a way to remember very deep concepts in like a nice way. Amr Rabbi Yitzchak. Now we mentioned before that Avram Avinu is called Yedid because Hashem said about Avram, Mali Yedidim Beisi. What is my beloved doing in my house? Says the Gemara, Amr Rabbi Yitzchak, B'shah shecharav Beis Hamikdash. At the time when the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, Motzar Hakadosh Baruch Hu Avram shayayim Beis Hamikdash. Avram Avinu's neshama was davening in the Beis Hamikdash. Amr lo mali yedidim beisi. So Hashem said, "What is my beloved doing in the house?" A pasuk in Yirmiyah. What is Avram Avinu doing in the house? So Amr lo alaski b'nei ba'asi. Avram Avinu said, "I'm coming to daven for Klal Yisrael during the Churban." So Amar Loi, so Hashem said, Banecha chatu v'galu. Hashem's sort of defending himself. Hashem said, you understand, your children sinned, I had to send them into galus. So Amar Loi, so Avram Avinu starts to defend Klal Yisrael. Shema b'shoigeg chatu. Maybe their sins were accidental. Hashem responded, Amar Loi, asoisa hamzimasa. They did a mizima, they planned it. This is on purpose. Their averis were b'mezid. So Amar Loi Shema miyutan chatu. But perhaps only a minority of Klal Yisrael sinned, says Avram. Hashem said, harabim. No, the majority of Klal Yisrael sinned. Hayel bris milah. So Avram said, yeah, but what about the bris milah? You should have remembered the bris milah to protect Klal Yisrael. Amar Loi ubesar kodesh yavru me'elecha. They removed the bris milah, meaning they were trying to be made for the bris. So Amar Shemeh Mibtinulem Hayu Chayzim B'Tshuva. Avram said to Hashem, though, you should have given them time. They could have done Shuva if you gave them time. So Amar Kirasani Ostalu. When they do evil, they rejoice. Meaning Hashem says they're dancing as they do Averis. Time's not going to help this. So he says, Miyad Heniach Yadav Al Roisha V'Yitzaygu B'Oicha. Avram Avinu puts his hand on his head and he's crying and he's wailing. Amar Shemeh Chas Shalom Ein L'Takana. So he said to Hashem, so what? There's no hope for Klal Yisrael. Yatzis Abaskal v'Amra, a heavenly voice came out and says, Zeis Ranon Yefei Pritayar Kar Hashem Shemecha, that Hashem calls Klal Yisrael a leafy olive tree, meaning Klal Yisrael compared to olives. Ma Zayizu Achrisa B'Soifa, Af Yisrael Achrisa B'Soifa. Just like olives, apparently when you plant an olive tree, it takes a very long time for the fruit to go out. So just like the olive tree, the fruit only comes out at the very end. So to Klal Yisrael will have a happy ending. The Klal Yisrael Mashiach comes, they're going to come back. They'll be like an olive tree, which may be a long time where it's barren, but at the end it'll be full of fruit. Now the pasuk says, the next pasuk is L'kol hamula gedoyla heitzis Hashem aleha v'ro dil Yosef. Now I'll read you the translation of it. Because of the sound of the great commotion, he set fire to it, and his branches were broken. Now what is the great commotion? So Amrav Chinana bar Papa. It's the next pasuk in Yirmiyah. L'kol milehen shemaraglim. Hamula is actually from the word mila, from the great commotion of words, the great sound of words. Hashem burnt it all down. What is this referring to? The words were the Meraglim saying negative things about Eretz Yisrael. L'kol milei and shemaraglim nisrayu dil yoseim shel Yisrael. That because of the words of the Meraglim, that he's translating the word hamula to mila, milim, because of the words of the Meraglim, that Klal Yisrael, it broke the branches of Klal Yisrael. Now, by the way, what was it so devastating what the Meraglim said? Again, they shouldn't have said not nice things about Eretz Yisrael, but you want to say that Eretz Yisrael is not safe. That's such a reason to break Klal Yisrael. The answer is, what they said was much worse. The Gemara says, Davar Gadol Dibra Meraglim, they said a terrible thing at that moment. They said, Ki chazak hu mimenu, that the people of Eretz Yisrael are stronger than us. But what they actually said was, Al tikri mimenu ela mimenoi. It's actually greater than him, Kaviyachol, Chas v'Shalom, that they said that Hashem cannot take us into Eretz Yisrael, that the people of the Meraglim are strong, the people of Eretz Yisrael are stronger than God. Those great words broke Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says, now that's assuming that he's translating the word Hamula to Mila. Says the Gemara Maskar of Rabbi Chanina, Hailakol Hamula Gedayla Lakol Mila Mibaile. Then it shouldn't say Hamula, it should say Mila. So the answer is, you know what the word Hamula is actually from? Chemla, pity. The Gemara says, Ella, Amrle HaKadosh Baruch Hu L'Avram. It's actually more of a flow. Avram Avinu is defending Klal Yisrael, and Hashem says, no, they're going to be like an olive tree. And then the next pasuk says, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Avram, Kolcha Shamati, I heard your voice, V'chamalti, Hamula's Chemla. I have pity on Klal Yisrael. Now, meaning that Hashem said, don't worry, not only are they going to have a happy ending, I have Rachmanis. Now, what was the Rachmanis? Ani amarti yishtabdu ba'arba malchiyos. Kol achas v'achas b'shir arba malchiyos. Hashta kol chada v'chada ma'ide pasikla. Apparently, you know how each kingdom, Bavel was 70 years, the Persians were 52 years, I think the Greeks were 200 something. The point is, each one had their amounts. Apparently Hashem said, I was going to change that each one would last the equal amounts of all of them combined. Meaning, and that would be much longer, but Hashem said, don't worry, I have Rahmanis, that it's going to go back to the amount of time. 70 years, 52 years, whatever, is much, much less time. That's the first pshat. Or another pshat is that Hashem said, I was going to spread out the suffering, that each kingdom would be separate from the other, but now I'm actually going to have it where they get it all at once. So now you'll have, within one gullus, you'll have all different types of suffering. It's shorter, and therefore it's not as devastating. Okay. Rav Yeshua ben Levi. Rav Yeshua ben Levi says, Lama nimshal Yisrael l'zayis. Why are Klal Yisrael compared to an olive? To tell you, apparently olive trees have leaves on it year long. Just like olive trees have leaves on it year long, both in the winter and the summer. So to Klal Yisrael will never be able to be destroyed. They'll never have a seized moment. The same way the olive branches never are barren, so to Klal Yisrael will never be fully barren. Another pshat is a very famous pshat. Why are Klal Yisrael compared to an olive tree? Just like olives, in order to get the olive oil, you have to break it. So to Klal Yisrael, historically, it's dafka through moments of suffering that the greatness of Klal Yisrael comes out. Now, just to finish up the daf, that's the end of the Agarit. Back to the Mishnah. Now, the Mishnah had said that they were trying to figure out how do we make the yeast. So Rav Meir said, take some of the flour from the actual mincha itself, put a little bit of water, let it start to rise, and then put it back in. Rav Yehuda didn't like that because Rav Yehuda said it's not going to be very yeasty. So Rav Yehuda says, I'm going to bring a starter dough from outside sources. Rav Meir said, I don't like that either. Why? Because it's going to affect the flour amount. The Gemara just speaks it out. If you use sourdough that's thicker, it's going to have too much flour. Racha, and if you use a sourdough that's looser, meaning if I need a certain amount of flour, taking sourdough, I can't tell how much flour is in there. I could tell you the volume of the sourdough, but I can't definitively tell you how much flour is in it. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute, what do I care? The Gemara says, well, who cares? Don't you have the volume of dough? Meaning, the Gemara at this point thinks that it's not a matter of, let's say, an isaron is flour, it's isaron of dough. People ask us all the time, it's like, how much pounds like for challah? Usually, when you get a psak from a Rav, they'll tell you how much dough. They're not going to tell you how much flour, they'll tell you 3 pounds. Or sometimes the Rav will tell you, 1.5 pounds of flour. So the Gemara says, well, don't we care about the volume of dough? If the amount of, let's say a chavitin is supposed to have an isaron of dough, so then I can take a sourdough from outside because I'm just looking at the dough content. So what do I care that it'll affect the flour amount? I don't care if I'm looking for dough. So the answer is, you're not looking for dough, you're looking for flour. And if you're looking for flour, it's not going to work. The Gemara says, I have one more question. One more option. It helps if you're a baker. I'm not a baker. Spoiler. I don't really know exactly what this means fully. The options we've seen so far is to take a random sourdough from outside. You can't do that because it affects the flour amount. The other option is to take a little bit of this flour, let it rise for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and then put it in. The problem with that is that it's not going to be yeasty enough. So the Gemara says, I have another option. Lishkol purtamine, take out some of the flour, and then leaven it externally. Meaning, what you do is, you place it in a warm area or bury it within some other dough. Meaning, don't just give it 20 minutes to rise. Take it out, put it into another sourdough, really let it turn into sourdough, then put it back in. Now what you do by this is you solve both problems. It's super yeasty, and it's not going to affect the flour amount because you took it from this flour. Meaning, I have this bowl of isaron. I take 1 cup of flour, add water. So I know it's from this. I know it's a cup of flour. Then I don't just let it rise for a half hour. I put it in another sourdough. It'll turn into sourdough for, let's say, a day, 2 days, whatever it is, however long. Then you put it back. So why not? That's a great solution. It seems to fix everything. And the answer is with them to this. You're right, that's a good solution. The problem is people are not going to know the difference, and they're going to take outside sourdoughs, not do this methodology, not realizing that there's a distinction, and they're going to take outside sourdoughs that would affect the flour content. All right, we'll stop here.